There we go. Hey, everybody. Welcome once again to The Burn. I'm so excited today. I have a super special guest on board. He's waiting in the wings. Also, we had some huge news coming out last night from Las Vegas, a little Halloween action, and I'll have KTG 38 know the game a little bit later in the show. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the bell so you get notified when I'm live or drop a new episode. Click the like button, comment down below, and share the episode on your social media. I appreciate it. And with all of that out of the way, let's get this started. Okay, I am giddy. Today is a collab episode with DynastyProsFootball.com, the website I write for, and my own channel, The Fantasy Burn, at Big Boned at FFB. My guest today is a touring comic. He's a former college baseball stud, and he's a West Coast refugee from a small town in Tennessee.
I was on the team.
There you go. Most importantly, he's a dad. He's about to finish a bunch of West Coast stand-up dates, including San Francisco, Seattle, Vancouver, and Portland. Those dates will be in the episode description and on the ticker that we're going to have scrolling by in a second. Make sure you head to www.bwdtour.com. That's a lot of buzz. He has two specials available on YouTube. One's called Testify. The other is live at Third Man Records. Jealous of that. The links will be below. He was on Last Comic Standing. He toured with Ralphie May. He's worked with Louis C.K. He's been in a Borat movie. He probably ate free with Ducks and Mitch Hedberg at Subway. His debut album, Billy Wayne Davis, is available on Spotify. Please allow me to welcome Mr. Billy Wayne Davis.
Hell yeah. You made my life sound way more fun than, well, it is pretty fun. I'll be honest. I had fun. So
It's got to be pretty fun.
Like, yeah, that's like when you do the list like that, I'm like, hey, yeah, I've been having fun. That's awesome.
So you have some time off between shows. Let me do something real quick and plug the shows first. So Friday and Saturday, November 3rd and 4th, you'll be in Eureka, California. San Francisco, November 8th, I will be there. Vancouver, BC, Canada. What up, Grindberg? On November 9th. Seattle. What did I get wrong?
No, you nailed it.
Okay, Seattle, November 9th?
No, Seattle the 10th.
10th. Eugene the
11th.
And Portland the 12th. Okay.
Yes.
So again, www.bwdtour.com.
Yes, that is the best. Or just Google Billy Wayne Davis. All that stuff comes. That's what I just tell people now is like, if you just Google my name, all that stuff will come up. So
there you go. And I love the beanie.
Yeah, I changed it up when I was like, hey, yeah, it's a Raiders fan. All right.
Yeah, we can talk about that in a second. So you're going back to Seattle where you used to live. On a scale of 1 to 10 dicks deluxe, how excited are you to get to town and shove some dicks in your mouth?
I mean, it is. Yeah, because I was thinking about because like when you go to a city you used to live in and you've got a limited time, you gotta there's certain things and then you prioritize what is really important here that we hit.
Right.
And Dick's was on there. I was like, oh, but there's one because the club's in Belltown.
Okay.
So doing that is doing the geography and logistics of it. And I was like, oh, my favorite one is on Capitol Hill, but that's a jaunt. But there's a closer one in Lower Queen Anne.
Right.
No, that was a very Seattle Frasier answer is what that was. Like a lot of local references.
I lived in Seattle quite a bit before you did, and my spots are Lunchbox Laboratory, which is newish to me. I like the Queen Anne better than the Bellevue. Dick's, of course. Dick's Burgers. Dick's Drive-In is so good. And Pagliacci Pizza.
Yes, totally. For a chain. Totally.
Right. It's New York pizza in Seattle. It's amazing.
You're right. It is I didn't fully understand until you leave because it is it's everywhere. So you're like, nah, it's Pagliacci. It's and then every time you go, you're like, this is great.
Right. And they have somehow they have the best Parmesan cheese shake. It tastes different than every other Parmesan cheese shake I've had, and I don't know where they get it.
It's probably there's like they just put MSG or something awesome in it.
Yeah.
That's
So
usually the secret when it comes out is like, man, why is this? And they're like, oh, we put something super addictive in it. That it's
higher
like
fat,
blowing up.
higher salt.
Yeah,
There you
that's
go.
good.
So
Um,
when did you
Let me
start
ask you
this?
this, Seattle
Yeah,
person. I've been saying this recently because it is just that realization as someone that travels. Probably the best place in the United States for Thai food is Seattle, like
I
top to
was
bottom.
I was not on the Thai food express when I lived there. It wasn't huge. I lived there in the early 90s, like 92, 93, and
Okay.
I visited. There was a restaurant we went to called Poppy, which was like a little. It was more Indian though. It was like a thali dinner, but it was experimental thali. It's a pretty big chef who's there, and that restaurant was phenomenal. But yeah, I missed the Thai trend. We've gotten into it. I got some drunken noodles in the fridge from the other night. I my
It's once you yeah, that's where I got into it. Was there was a place that delivered when I lived in Lower Queen Anne, and
Yeah, and that's the only food that gets hot enough for my girlfriend. She's like alien level spice, and I do mild.
yeah, I was gonna say that's crazy. If it's like, oh, this is finally good enough, you're like, oh, some of it's not edible. Like
No,
it's
I can do habanero. I grew up in California on Mexican food. I can do up to habanero. She lived in China for her teenage years, so she tells like Indian and Thai places, think of how the hottest food is, make it twice that hot, and she's okay. It's crazy. She's
whoa.
weird. So I wanted to ask you how long this tour. When did you start this tour? Because these are the last dates.
Yeah, this is because okay, that's an interesting question. Kind of thought by, and I'll kind of give a boring comedian answer. Is after the quarantine, the landscape of the world was kind of different, and especially even stand up, things were all over, and I uh I was like, "Oh, we have to go back out again," and I'm not sure what's going on out there. So that's what this whole year has been like, dipping my foot back in, doing runs, figuring out like cities are cool, what cities are not anymore, who's booking what, and then the Northwest is and the West Coast has been real good to me.
So this has been a while. You've been on tour for a while. You took a break. You come back. You got Thanksgiving off. You'll be done for Thanksgiving. So that's
Yes.
pretty cool. Um, Juggling family and stand up touring got to be tough.
I mean, that's kind of like that's what I'm figuring out right now is like I'm changing the way I used to then from the way that's the cool part. I guess a better answer is like the cool part of what we do is we can do it any way you design it if you really want. There are pathways to certain, there's like a way to do certain things. But then if you're just really just trying to make a nice living doing what you love, I've figured out along the way, I mean, like anything else, you have to figure out different skills, but
Right.
you can make it work where, like, I'm going out for 9 days this month, has been total, or in, yeah, be about 9 days. And then I get to spend the rest of the month with my kids all the time. And I can go make a good amount of money in 9 days. Not,
Right.
I'm not getting rich, but I don't, you know what I mean? It's like,
It feels like
it's,
there's a certain sacrifice that it takes to get to that level, and we've seen a lot of guys that you can call headliners, and they cycle through relationships and they go through ups and downs, and it's like it's tough to kind of keep everything together.
oh, yeah, it's a 24/7 thing where some days and you gotta have a good partner, like, I'm literally going from this to couples therapy, not because like, there's, like, anything wrong with our relationship, it's
Right.
that this is we have to maintain because we're both do kind of, like, not normal everyday jobs that are kind of demanding of time in weird ways, but also give us an enormous amount of freedom. that
Right.
most people don't have to. So that
Similar.
trade-off, yeah, I mean, you understand, like, that trade-off is, like, something we really love, but, like, you can get caught in your own what I'm doing, and then you're like, "Why aren't you helping me do?" And she's just like, "Well, why aren't you helping me?" You're like, "Oh, that's a good point." Uh, it is like that is, I think, the most important part is finding someone that gets what you do if you're doing something weird, and then is willing to grow with you
Right.
because because people are gonna change and get, or even together your experiences are different, and then your interests might change or whatever, and it's like, oh well, it's someone you like want to be like your ultimate goals are the fun things and getting to retirement, but
Right.
doing fun things. Yeah,
Share your life.
I think it's I've used a lot of words to get around using the word soulmate,
Yeah.
but it is to get all corny. It
Your
is
person.
kind of, I think that's important. And you're
Yeah.
right. And I think a lot of people, and by people I mean comedians, make the mistake, and I've done it, is you need more of an identity than comedian.
Yeah. Well, any
Bec-
job, anything that you do, you
yeah.
have to be more. And as a former therapist, I've always told people counseling is good, even if you don't think that there's an issue there. It, especially if, I mean, you can have two people who are great communicators, but that doesn't necessarily apply in the relationship. And if you can get somebody in the middle and they help with the communication, it just makes everything better. So the fact that you
No, it
do
is.
that
Yeah.
is, I mean, that's like it shows the effort and commitment on both sides. So that's phenomenal.
Well, oh, you see that, you're like, oh, we love each other. That's why we're still like kind of button heads about certain things. And then we're similar. That's why we were attracted to each. It's like it's fun.
Yeah.
But I think it lends itself to what we do is getting someone that not necessarily does what we do. That works sometimes, but is like knows it.
Yeah.
So
Or at least is understanding and supportive. That's important.
yeah.
So keeping with the family theme, you were raised in a small town in Tennessee by an English teacher and a coach dad. How are you getting an opportunity to coach your boys?
My oldest, he he dabbled this year in JV football. Didn't love it, which is like I get it. Uh, that's why I was interested. I was like, oh, you've never really played. Now you're a freshman. But I kind of I I take this like hands off approach right now, and what I kind of like to do is like put them in different sports till till one, till they like I like, and you're like, okay.
Right.
And then and I've told my oldest, I was like, I'm gonna let you try whatever. And then when you take a certain, you take to one, because that's usually how it works. Then I will kind of push you to get back and show you how to like set goals and do that.
Right.
Uh, and then my little one who's 4, he just he's still he plays with the older kids, so it's just my wife is doing the assistant coaching, but he's just figuring out how it works, which is like
Yeah.
a great, as a 4-year-old, it's fine. I've already put him in gymnastics. I put the older, like, what I'm doing is like giving them like a know your body foundation. Like I put the older one when he was little in judo because that teaches you how to fall down.
Yeah. Balance.
Well, more than balance. It just teaches you like that's the first couple lessons in judo is like how to, when you're, because everyone's gonna fall down. That is just life. And then when I was reading about arts, once you should put the little one to, just for like basic body stuff, and it was like, oh, judo's the best because it they'll learn that foundation of like this thing of like you don't even think about it. You're just like, oh, I know how to fall down. You're like, whew, that is so important to
Yeah.
because they fall. That's just all they and their heads are so important.
And we saw it in the world of fantasy football. Tua Tagovailoa, the Miami Dolphins quarterback, spent a couple. He had a couple of really bad concussions last
I
year.
can't believe he's still playing,
I thought
honestly.
I thought he was going to retire, but he took, I think, a jujitsu class to learn how to fall, and he's back and one of the most
There's like
productive
a
quarterbacks.
it's there's beta we know we're so far advanced as humans and we're still but like what we know about the body is like we know and there's a way to learn it and do it and it's I tricked my dad into doing yoga, which is awesome because he loves golf so goddamn much. And I noticed he's like super tight. And I was like, I got my mom to do it. And you just, you're getting older. You just need to learn. I just don't want him to, I want him to be able to move. And
Glad to
then,
know your mom is not yoga phobic.
uh, no, she was. I think she wants to be more progressive than she is, but she's surrounded by an East Tennessee little town. So
It's hard in the South.
you got to work with what you got. You know what I mean?
Yeah, another little parallel. I graduated from Arkansas Tech University, so I lived in Russellville. I traveled through Tennessee quite a bit, going to Memphis and Nashville. Nashville is phenomenal, um, and I got in. I went from being a small liberal college town raised by hippies to the South in 1998, and it was a wake up call to how the rest of the world works. But the Southern culture is so endearing that I absolutely love it and have friends that I maintain to this day who are just the greatest people that I've ever known. And I love it. I
It's
love it.
it's a weird thing to explain how it works to people that have never been around, like, where it's like where you're like we're like, "Well, that's a racist," and you're like, "Yeah, but that racist would help you do anything, like, even a black person." And they're
Right,
like, "What do you
right.
mean?" You're like, I can't explain the disconnect sometimes, but it exists in this it's confusing as fuck, but it is a unique place. I'm sorry I cussed. I don't know if this is a
No,
good cuss
fuck it.
one or not. Okay. All right. I didn't. Sometimes I don't, and I will get in trouble on terrestrial radio real quick now when I do those. But we're just free, and then they'll be like, "Hey, you're in a." You're like, "Okay, okay, my
Yeah,
bad." Uh, but then the FCC isn't anything if we're being honest.
yeah. They'll take a shit right on your head if you're into no effects. You know that line. All right, real
I
quickly,
do know.
fantasy football. How much fantasy
Yes,
football have you played?
I played probably 4 seasons. Uh, I got into it, got in a nice league, and then two people passed away in the league, and that like
Ah,
not like I mean one kind of tragically, and one was just more like, huh, okay, we probably and everyone I think was like, well, I don't. None of us were tight. It was like
right.
friends of like one of those things, and that's how I kind of enjoyed it because it wasn't like I wasn't fighting with, or I wasn't being super competitive with a friend that would mess my thing up,
Yeah,
our relationship. So it was like kind of strangers, and then the one dude I knew died. Hmm, okay, this is we're probably not gonna do this, and I haven't got him back into it. I did that took a weird morbid turn, but I had fun until
yeah.
life happened.
Is there any kind of like, are there comedians that are into it? Like, do you know other
Oh,
people that?
I will say this: the comedians I know that are into it are also they also love gambling.
Okay,
So the the ones I know, it's an addiction thing where
right,
it's like, well, and I'm okay with it because it's not drugs or alcohol.
yeah,
So I'm like, you just we're all we're all messed up clowns. So at least yours is math based, and
right.
you know what I mean.
I'm a
So
degenerate. I'm in 25 leagues, and I turned that into doing this and writing for it, and so,
okay, yeah, then that
so
is healthier than crack. because it
Yeah,
sounds like if you put your mind into crack, you would do a lot of crack. It's
that's
like,
that's really true.
uh
Raiders fandom. Are you an actual Vegas fan?
huh. I mean, I was so bummed they moved to Vegas. I'll be honest, it bummed. And then I read this take where they should have taken the Chargers to Vegas and moved the Raiders to LA, and I was
Back
like,
to LA. Yeah,
duh, yeah. Uh, but yes, since Bo Jackson, I'm great Tennessee, and there was no team then. There's no Titans. I'll follow the Titans just because a lot of my friends and family do now, but I have no connection to them like I do the Raiders. And I know I'm a true Raiders fan because I get excited every year.
yeah. How about the Hilltoppers? Did you adopt them, being going to Western Kentucky?
Man, I I just no. I
No.
even when I went, it was like I was. Do you know what this is weird. I've never examined. That's an interesting question. No one's ever asked me that, but I always joke. But even when I went to Western, and I've never really processed this or thought about it, but like I always felt I was like at a visitor's school because like I was a Tennessee fan. I grew up 45 minutes from Knoxville. I went to every home game, the national championship.
Yeah. Oh
I
man.
was a senior. Yeah, I was a senior in high school, so it was like this is awesome.
Going to school in Arkansas, I adopted the Arkansas Tech Wonder Boys because that was the school I went to. But you cannot enter the state unless you declare fealty to the Razorbacks and learn the hog call. So became a Razorbacks fan too, and watched in heartbreaking fashion as Clint Sterner fumbled the ball against Tennessee and broke all of our hearts in a winnable game that would have given the Razorbacks a beeline to the national championship. So I hope that that game made you happy.
It was raining. I was dating this freshman at UT. I was a senior in high school. um, and I left because we were like, over. This is the seasons. I mean, yeah, that's how you think too. You know, the SEC is just all or goddamn nothing. It's so fun. And we were like, well, let's. This is wow, what a ride. That was we anyway. And she's like, you want to go back to my dorm? And I was like, yes, I do.
Yeah,
And my dad was at the game, so I had to meet him. I knew we were going to meet later that night or that evening to go back, and but he knew I was going with her to the thing, so I
you
was
got
just
to
like, well, the timing, I was like, oh yeah, yes, yeah, that was even an option before right now, and it was yes,
let me lay
and
it down like Clint Sterner.
it was, and I mean, you want to run? Let's run back to just an idiot. And then yeah, we get back to the dorm, and things like it's just fumbling. I'm also fumbling stuff,
Yeah,
and when I think like, oh, things are about to happen, we just hear the stadium explode. So it did like I was glad it happened as a Tennessee fan, but
right.
looking back, it did cockblock me.
No, that's
I never thought
terrible.
of that either. This is a fun conversation going back. You had great questions because I had never thought
Thank you.
about that. But I don't think we were gonna have sex, but at the time, some girl was gonna touch my thing, and that
Yeah,
was it was super exciting. Uh,
yeah. Just touch me on the shoulder and I'll finish. That's
it was, I mean, yeah, like, hey, I'm looking at you. I'm like, that's cool. I'm done.
yeah.
Uh, and Clint Sterner messed that up for me too. So he ruined a lot of people's day that day.
Well, I asked the Hilltoppers question because right now in there's a so in fantasy football you have your standard fantasy football and then you have dynasty leagues which you carry over the team to the next year, and now there's a bigger trend, Devi or developmental, where you draft college players. So you can have college player fantasy leagues, but you can also have guys that you draft in college and then they carry over into your dynasty team once they graduate to the NFL. And one of my quarterbacks in one of my Debbie leagues is Austin Reed, the Western Kentucky quarterback, and that kid slings it. So if you want to get into Hilltoppers football, Austin Reed is the guy to watch right now, and he'll be hitting the NFL next year, and and he'll be one of those under the radar guys coming from a smaller school like Western Kentucky. And if you
Well,
get back into fantasy, slide into that late round pick with Austin Reed, and you'll be happy.
Western's football program is interesting because they were doing it was Harbaugh's dad, Jack, was the coach when I was there. They won a national championship. It was like 1 AA
Right,
was what it was when I was there, and then so I would go to some games because I mean I saw the Harborough boys. I used to see them around campus, like because I would be in like the dining hall or whatever. I also figured out the athlete stuff is nicer, so you go and everyone can use it, but it's for the athletes. So yeah, I'm
right,
gonna use that. But he was doing what Belichick was doing. That system, he was taking these Division 1 players that would get in trouble and then be like, "Come play in 1 AA," and then if you mess up, you're done. But this is your like a second chance thing, and then so they had to go into the NFL like the whole time I was
right,
because it was one dude was so good. He got in trouble in Florida. He was at some school in Florida, and then he was a defensive back, and it was just clear. It was like, why? How is he here? And they're like, he got in trouble with. I was like, oh, okay, because like even if he was in an SEC school, he would have been like one of those players that's just like he's still better than everyone in
right,
this league, and now he's in Conference USA or what or now he's in the Sun Belt,
right.
and and
That's
then he got in trouble. He got kicked out because he went to the league. I do believe, but I remember he got in trouble for he stole a parking pass and got caught. And I was like, y'all, why not let that guy? Like, also, I get it. Those parking is like $250 for a
right, and they
semester.
don't they didn't pay the players. So where's he? He's got
It
a park.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's like y'all. This is you're setting motherfuckers up for failure here. This is messed up. So
yeah.
yeah,
Similar thing with Dante Culpepper. He like had some behavior issues, and uh, so he had a Alabama rejected his scholarship offer. A whole bunch of people pulled it back, and Central Florida kind of said, "Hey, we'll protect you." And then once he started performing, they all went after him, and he was like, "No, I'm sticking here." And then he
yeah.
became Dante Culpepper. So
Mm.
I know you don't have a lot of time. I have a story about I played hardball my entire life until about a couple years ago, and I used to play with a guy that pitched for Western Kentucky, left-hander named David something, pitched there in the like early 2000s. I don't
No
remember
shit.
his last name, but yeah,
Damn
he was.
it.
I've been searching for it on the internet for the last 3 days and I can't find it. So
Because I
I
knew I went to Vol State. I saw you had the field pulled up on the border. I was like, hey man, that is whoa. Uh, some good times.
yeah
Uh, and then I did because one of the coaches at Western when I went up there after because I was, like, kinda done with baseball, uh, was a teammate of my high school coach, and my high school coach just mentioned that I was going up there, and he was like, "What?" He played at Vol State, and, like, that was a we had quite a program at the time,
well yeah
and
national champion contenders
yeah, it was I mean, it was that f my yeah, we were it was fun. Like, we
yeah
won we never lost 2 games in a row my freshman year. We were 4 and
shit.
they were coming
Uh,
in. I was like, "Mm, it's not good." I was like, "In baseball, it's not. It's such a streaky, weird momentum mind thing
yeah
because I'll tell you what it is, and they won't explain it on television. It's rhythm. Is once you start playing, and that's why we won 22 games in a row that year, which is insane. Like
yeah
when I look, as the older I get, the more I look back on it. Because when you're doing it, you're just like, this is what we're doing. This is, and I remember how elated we all kind of were when we lost. And I remember our insane, awful coach. who didn't recruit any of us. He kind of swooped in, came in and started yelling at us. We weren't up, and we were just like, that's when I was like, this dude does not. This is all us. This is all
Right.
us. This dude's not. He has no idea what the fuck is happening. And our hitting coach is just like looking confused. I remember looking at him, and he's like just rolling his eyes. He's like, "Fuck this." Yeah, this is insane. Like yelling at us, like y'all lost, right? Yeah, I remember we were excited. We lost by like 7. It's just like, hey, it was time. We're tired.
We got beat.
And well, it was inning 7. Oh, we're gassed. Uh and they're on it. But our first baseman we called Mule, just this, the reason. He's a first baseman named Mule. He hit a home run in the top or bottom of the ninth that didn't matter, but I don't know if it's still like it may still be going some. It was just the one of the longest home runs I've ever seen, and we were all just like, even losing, we were like, God damn! Like it was going up, like out. It was still going up out of the park where you're just like, I don't even. He's like, I gotta hold that good one. We were just like, no, man, that was crazy. And so we're in the dugout talking about, and it's just this weight had lifted, and our coach, y'all don't. Blah. We're like, okay, this is ridiculous.
Right. Yeah. I had a question about what's your favorite movie and why is it Everybody Wants Some. Um, Basically, Everybody Wants Some is a Linklater film about a college baseball team in the South, and there's some exaggeration, but it's pretty spot on as far as the bonding experience, the shenanigans that come with being a part of a team
I've
that
never
is
seen it. I've
competitive.
never even heard of this movie,
Oh my
and
god.
I love Linklater, and I
Yeah.
love. There's so many times I've sat down to write and I can't decide if I want to go like essay kind of style book about about the junior college experience in baseball,
Yeah.
particularly. Um, and then or kind of like a narrative based on, because I think now with the internet and the access to, it's tougher to be like, and then the shortstop and the thing, people can be like, that so and so, blah blah blah, and you're like, yeah, that is, you can't fully tell these stories of who these people really like in important flaws, character flaws, and things like that. You don't want to like be people. So it's like the more
Right.
I think about it, the more I'm like, oh, I think I need to write like some kind of
So
narrative.
before you do that, watch Everybody Wants Some as soon as you can. So there are a couple of projects out there like the Bear is it's like working in the food industry.
Yeah,
There's an old Don Cheadle movie called Manic. I worked in psychiatric hospitals. It's Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Don Cheadle. It's the closest thing I've ever seen to what it is actually like to work in an adolescent unit at a psychiatric hospital. Everybody Wants Some
my aunt worked
is
at Cumberland Hall in Nashville.
she would love this movie too. It's uh, manic, I mean, but with Everybody Wants Some, it is the culture of being a part of a high level baseball team. I think it's at UT Texas is
They have
uh,
quite a program. Yeah, that was.
but
Yeah,
it's the shenanigans, it's the bonding experience, it's those character flaws. It's more about the actual culture of the baseball team than it's not like a the natural hits a big home run with sparks at the end. It's like what it feels like to do that. I mean, I did a lot of like traveling competitive baseball. Some of my favorite times of my life were sharing hotel rooms on the road, the smells of the locker room, the dugout, the field, the chatter, being super hungover and still able to go out and bang and pick it at first.
it's
um,
yeah. I
this
mean, you're.
movie is that.
I remember so vividly, because he come from a little town in East Tennessee. There wasn't a legacy of winning and things like that. So, and that was something that I was like, I want, and we had a great football team my senior year, and we had a decent baseball team my senior year. And, but that was like something that I was like, I had probably better offers for playing and stuff. but I was like, this program is like the best. So I want to go see like where I'm at on this thing. And then I found out it was cool. You found out where you're like, hey, I do belong here. This is awesome.
Yeah.
And I remember it was like midway or three-fourths into the season before we like maybe hit number one in the rankings. It would come out once a week. And I remember being on a bus coming back from beating somebody pretty bad that was supposed to be real good. Uh, and looking around the bus and being like, oh, this is what it is. Like, it's not as super glamorous as you think, but it's like so much better than you think it's going to be too. And then my sophomore year, we won a conference championship. I mean, we had to go to the regionals, and we lost there, but we were like one game away from the World Series. And I remember winning that conference championship. And that's up there with being the one ranked team in the country.
Yeah.
And it was the same kind of weirder. You're like, oh, it's not about that trophy as much as like all like this whole ride to get here with all these. It was the same. I had the same feeling I had the year before, but after we won the thing, and I was like, oh, this is neat. And then my best friend since kindergarten was playing for, and he's aware. He's like he was on like the Bad News Bears of the league. Like there was one coach, and he was like, my first game when they went me, he was like, I was doing middle relief. They told me to go, and he's like, I ran to the bullpen. And he was like, and I had to wait for the catcher to finish smoking a cigarette. And I was like, shut up. And he was like,
Nice.
we had fun. He was like,
Yeah.
it sounds like the opposite of your experience. I was like, yeah, it was intense where I was playing. It was, and but we both have. What's funny is like we both have that same like what's important is everything. So
Yeah.
it's a team thing where it's like, and the older you get, I think too. And this is a good podcast. I'm sorry I don't have more time.
No
Um,
worries.
and a lot of people don't ask me about sports, so this is fun. Uh, in Hollywood,
Yeah.
um, is like the older you get, you realize how hard it is to put together a really great team. And when you're young and you're part of a couple or something like that, you don't. It it's probably why people get kind of nostalgic for it more than they realize is because it's like I've been and as an adult I've been part of like some cool projects and some amazing teams, and then some mostly complete disjointed nonsense is
Yeah.
what most of life is.
Well, you hear about actors who they're on a set for 6 weeks and then they leave and they're like, I miss everybody. Or you see players who have been in that locker room for 20 years, they retire, and then all of a sudden it's like them with all day. What can I do? Work out and hang out with my spouse. I'm going to unretire. And because you just don't get that feeling anywhere else, but that the camaraderie of being part of a team, regardless of whether it's sports or
Well, my one of my friends is a former Green Beret and who got injured in Afghanistan, and that is a thing I think he struggles with that he's not even aware of yet. Is like because he's younger, but there is like that part of him, like it's the team thing too, man. It is like it
brothers.
it is, and even like I've experienced it a couple times when I toured with Sturgill Simpson.
Oh my God. I
That that uh that tour especially and that crew was kind of smaller, and then the way we all connected instantly, like I'm still in touch with all those motherfuckers, and and we all have done cool weird things and big things and small things since then, and it is that thing of like, oh, that was like a real special one, and people are like, and all of
yeah.
us like, yep, that was a cool one, yep.
Well, immediately I just thought we need a new Mike Judge animated series with Billy Wayne Davis voicing the lead and Sturgill Simpson writing the theme song.
That's if you know him, I can get
Sturgill
Sturgill
does.
on board pretty quick.
Sturgill knows Mike Judge.
Well, I've made him laugh. I made Mike laugh a couple of times, but I
Ah,
wasn't to a point mentally where I wanted to have a conversation with him. I just
yeah.
needed to know that, oh, you know what I do now. And that was a cool moment. And then eventually he and I will get to do. But
So
I get to work with Dave Willis a lot, so I'm not complaining about my life.
right.
He's a fucking genius too. So
Well, I'm gonna get this going so you can get out of here. I would love to have you back if you want more questions. I have a whole like half hour of stand up questions because I do stand up and write sketch and stuff like that. So that's my other stuff.
we could
Um,
do that. It would be. I was gonna say. I was like, oh, we could do that from a hotel or something. But then I looked and I was like, I would. I no. I don't give myself enough.
that not
I'll
it's
get
not
excited and I'll be like, oh, we can put it right here. And then during there, I'm like, I'm not gonna be 100% uh engaged on that. That's not the best idea. I'm
whenever you
learning
have
how to
time.
set boundaries and say no so I can perform at a better level. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And
Okay.
I'm glad you didn't set a boundary with me being some low level Twitter fuck that just sends you a
That's why
DM out of
I'm.
the
And by
blue
the
and
way, I'm not on Twitter. Oof, it's rough.
yeah. It's very rough.
It's rough.
So I don't want to spoil Testify, but there's a line in there. I sent you a DM last Christmas. My girlfriend was really stressed about the holidays. We sat down and we watched Testify, or I showed her Testify. I had already seen it before. And there's a description that you make of the South that there's 8 to 12 large cities, and then the rest of it is exactly what you think it is, only way more intense. And I was like, you have to see this because she experienced that the first time I took her down to Louisiana and Arkansas and Tennessee and Mississippi. We went through, um, but that was exactly her description of it. Was I thought I knew the set, and this is just like that, only way more intense.
Hmm.
So with that, I ask everybody who's a guest to come up with a top 5 power rankings. We'll rank them 5 to 1. And you said cities with unique cultures, and I had a feeling when I saw that you were talking about 5 cities in the South.
Yeah.
So
I
uh,
mean, I gotta go. And if I'm honest, New York City is the coolest place in America.
sure,
There's without it, like you have to like. It's like if you no. Anyway,
it's like Walmart. If you need something, it's there.
and there's no other place like it. There really, and it's its own thing, and it's beautiful and wonderful, and that is. But that aside, that's not what I mean. That is, I would say, it gets weird. My top three, okay, it would be, and then this is no particular order. Like these
Okay,
are just, I'm just gonna name five
I'll
that I
allow it.
can't. I'll name the top three, and then I'll name the rest. Okay, so I think Houston, Texas is probably my favorite city.
Interesting.
It's not what it's probably one of the most international cities we have, low key.
Wow.
Uh and there's a lot it's just not what it appears. It looks like there's nothing happening. It looks kind of low key and boring, but once you get the vibe and the rhythm of that place, it is unlike any other place. I really love it. I've spent
Wow.
some I do. And then New Orleans, there's just no other place in the world like New Orleans. All of Louisiana is
Right.
just like this thing where you're like, I don't know what y'all are doing. It's fun, but I don't. This is nuts.
Yeah.
Uh, and then
Hmm.
Atlanta's the and not to get all bleeding heart or whatever, but like there is something like I get emotional because it's so fucked up that there's only one or two cities in America where black people have a middle class and get to, like that. It's insane, and so Atlanta's like this amazing place in the South, especially because it's where it's at and what the history of it, and then how black people are like, we're gonna make this ours, and you're like, yes,
Yeah.
yes, and that's why it's culturally just the coolest place in the fucking world. My wife says she's like, it's home of the coolest black people and the worst white people, and I was like, that is perfect.
Yep.
That is perfect. And then it doesn't get a lot of credit, but it is its own planet. Is Miami?
Oh,
Miami is the most unique place it is. There's no other place I've ever been that's even remotely close to Miami. It's its own thing of things. It is, and I've been to the Middle East. I've been to, I've been to Europe. Like Miami's its. I've been to a lot of places in South America yet, but whew, I love Miami is underrated. It's overwhelming when I go. I'm always like, I don't know if I can. It's like being in. You ever walk into a place where everyone's like so cool that you're like, we shouldn't be in this room.
right.
Like, I don't,
Yeah.
they're gonna, I don't even know. Like, that's how I feel and I'm having fun the whole time I'm in Miami, but the whole time I'm like, they just, they're gonna know that I can't keep up with this. But then you look around in Miami, right? I don't think anyone's keeping up. I think everyone's just feeling like there's just like a vibe. They're like, all right, we gotta jump off this ride or we're all gonna die. And you're like, I think so. I think that's why we're all moving so fast. That's our clothes fell off. This place is nuts. Uh, and then uh I mean Lexington, Kentucky's its own weird thing that I was just at that I really it's creepy, weird thing that's very unique to that specific place. Uh, all of Tennessee is just this weird because they do the three sections, and they
Yeah.
really are middle and east kind of get along, but West Tennessee's its own place too. Like
Yeah.
it's just like a different geography, and so it's a different vibe. The climate's a little different. I love Memphis. It's weird and dangerous.
You ever
Uh,
played the Daisy before?
I don't think so. Maybe. I've played a lot of weird spots I can't remember the name of in Memphis where it's like you just gotta keep your head on a swivel there.
Right.
And I don't mean that in like a fucked up way. I mean that in like a no, that's it, just ask anyone that lived there. Like, yeah, that's yeah. Like
Yeah.
any socioeconomic class, like any everyone would be like, yeah, you should. Yeah, it's
Yeah. Nashville is a place that I
they
had.
ruined it. They ruined it.
See, my experience with it was in '99 or 2000. The Razorbacks played in the NCAA tournament. My friend and I got off work at 11 o'clock at night. We drove straight to Nashville, hit a McDonald's at like 8 in the morning. Went to an Irish pub called Shawnahey
I
because it
know where you're
was
talking about.
it was St. Patrick's Day morning, and after being up all night, we started drinking green beer and then went and watched all the NCAA games, and then
Yeah,
drove back.
that's
And it was right
what
after they revamped everything.
that is a good. That's a great. I mean, if you're like, I just when I left, it was like the end of 2006. I was moving to Seattle, and it was this gritty, kind of grimy, creative town where there was the weird religious stuff, and then it's like this seedy entertainment town that was like mostly it wasn't about fame, it was about like making cool shit, whether it was rock and roll or country music. Like there was the polished turd stuff of country music, but there was also like so many dope musicians kids I knew.
Yeah.
Like I knew Justin Towns Earl before he was, you know, my wife knew him
Wow.
separately. And she was like, "Oh, you remind me of this guy that I know." And I was like, "Hey," and she was like, "Justin Towns." I was like, "I know him." I was like, she was like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah, no, he's used to do heroin, blah, blah, blah." She's like, "Yeah, yeah." I was like, He's
Yeah.
really funny. He's a fucking awesome." Yeah,
Steve's kid.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I was like, he got into the two people he's named at. His names is heroines. So he's gonna uh rest his soul, sweet baby. Like so it was like full of like these weird creative types that knew how to make money in weird ways, but didn't mind working. And then like there was like a lot of weird dives that had history. And then I could smoke cigarettes and play pool with John Prine and
God damn.
that kind of shit. Like so, and then I moved away, and I would come back every 6 to 8 months and play Zanies or wherever. I mean, it's mostly Zanies, and you'd see stuff, and you're like, huh. That's different. And then one day I didn't come back for like a year or like 18 months because that's the way it worked out. And it had changed so much that I was like, I don't understand. Like, traveling, you get to see the progression of a lot of places you go to. And
Right.
most of them are pretty gradual, but they make sense. And the vibe of the place rarely changes completely. But that's what happened in Nashville, of like the
Nashville did.
complete vibe of a place. Like, oh, this is a different place than it used to be, which is like, I'm, and I don't mean it like, oh, it's bad now. I'm just saying like, it's like a totally different place that I don't vibe with the same way,
Right.
which is, as you can tell, is a mind fuck for me at this point. Where I'm like, I still do well when I play Zanies. That's one of the best clubs in the goddamn world, and history is stand up. Like it is.
Zanies,
I would
Nashville.
not be the comedian I am today without that place, without starting at that special place. But city around it, it's weird.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite things about the South is the juxtaposition of wealth and poverty, because they're both pretty stark. Pretty quickly, you can go from big houses with pillars in the front on a hill to like clapboard houses with plywood on the windows. And then you have a really nice restaurant. And then within 20 feet, you've got a big gravel parking lot with one of those letter signs. And if you've never been to the South, you don't know what a letter sign is. But that's one thing that I miss is the big signs that go in the front with the letters on it that you can change, and the big arrow on the top that look like they're about 40 or 50 years old, but they are everywhere.
They're awesome,
And
and you can take letters from some signs, and then you can spell different stuff on the other signs. Uh yeah, that was a fun high school thing we would do. It's just
I didn't get that growing up here. They don't have those in California. Could have been an experience.
I wonder if I could. Yeah, yeah. You only see them like in like hipster kind of patio bars or some shit
Oh,
outside the
maybe,
South. That's where yeah, like in Denver or some of those.
but that's yeah. I like Silver Lake, something like that. I don't even have a frame of reference for hipster places.
That's good. God bless you.
All
I
right,
live, I live
Billy
in.
Wayne.
Yeah,
I am so happy that you were here.
this is
They
great. I'm glad that Twitter brought us together. Usually, Twitter does not bring me to good people anymore.
well,
So
I took a shot and you took a shot, so um,
I did have the thought because I just had a silly Twitter experience last and a couple 3 days ago, right before we connected. I was like, should I have done more research on this guy? And then like immediately you had that and then that hat, and I was like, oh, we're good, we're fine.
right on.
Just-
Uh, yeah, and I will see you on the 8th.
yes,
No,
yes.
um, so I have a lot more comedic stuff. I do stand up, and I've been an historical fan of stand up. I started in the early '80s watching Sam Kinison and Eddie Murphy and all that stuff. Always loved it. I like raised my kids on watching specials and stuff. But it wasn't until I got into Doug Loves Movies podcast that I started actually going to the shows and then smoking after the show with Doug and guests. And like I grew, and I gave Doug and Jeff Tate some homegrown for Christmas, and hung out with Sean Jordan and all that stuff. So if you're ever going to the Sack Punch, um, that's where I do open mics and stuff.
By
Um,
the mattress place.
right next to the mattress
Yeah.
store. Um,
Uh,
so someday, maybe after I get polished, I can open for you.
I was
Um,
gonna say if my friend Mike McGowan I do the cannabis podcast with, he's going to do a guest set in San Francisco where I would offer you one. But if you come to the show, he's we're gonna have so much. We're coming from Humboldt, then New York City, and
Oh shit.
then to San Francisco. So in that courtyard after the show at the Punchline in San Francisco, you guys, I will come out. Give me like 10 minutes to gather myself, and then I will meet everybody outside, and we can poof accordingly. So
Yeah.
I cannot wait.
Yeah. Well, they say never meet your heroes because they're sure to disappoint you. I have to say, I'm glad you got a chance to come into the burn and meet me, and I hope I didn't disappoint.
No, you were amazing. It is.
Sweet.
I was worried about that too. I'm like,
All right. Send me an email when you're ready to kind of come back on.
yep.
I'll try and
And
wait for you
if
in
you
San
don't hear
Francisco.
from me uh in 2 weeks, just follow up. I'll
Okay.
get kind of. I have kids in the tour, and then it won't be with malice. I'll just be like, well, just remind me if you haven't, if I haven't followed up, and then we will get another 30, 45 minutes on the fucking books.
Okay. I have a lot of stuff about stand up process and how you go about that. So we can dive deep into that.
I
And
hope I can help. I'm just I
I
think I was like, is your brain fucked up? Because that seems to be the number one through line
sure,
of all
but
the funniest people I know. Is like, I was just had this thing in my therapist that I have to go to right now. Is like, she finally made me say something out loud that I've had jokes about, but like the actual thing. And I was like, huh. I was like, this whole time I've been doing comedy, I've been like, I guess I'm like one of the few ones that doesn't have like a fucked up thing or anything. And then you made me say that out loud, and I was like, oh, well, there it is. God damn it.
I'm not a unicorn.
Yeah. I was like, oh, yeah, God, we're all assholes. Oh, God damn it. So,
Right on.
thanks, man.
Well, this was a great pleasure. Have a great tour, and I'll see you in a week.
Yes. Yes. See
All
you.
righty. Thank you, sir. And that was Billy Wayne Davis. He gave me 25 minutes, or he promised me 25 minutes, and he gave me an hour. So I couldn't be happier. Uh, I apologize for anybody who's in here looking for fantasy football content. We should have that coming up pretty soon. Know the game 38 should get in here in a second, and let me just give him a message, and we'll get that going. Um, for anybody who's interested in going to see Billy Wayne Davis live, if you're on the West Coast, in the Northwest, just like we said, right across the scroll, bwdtour.com, Eureka, San Francisco, Vancouver, Seattle, Eugene, Portland, ending on the 12th. No, the game is here with me. All right. So here's the deal.
A little bit
We
of
had
news.
um, a little bit of news come down while everybody was out trick or treating last night on the West Coast. People on the East Coast were asleep.
I was
Josh
working.
McDaniels and David Ziegler and Mike Lombardi ousted from the Las Vegas Raiders coaching staff and GM office. They're gone, replaced, and it couldn't. I mean, it could have come at a better time, but it couldn't have come any sooner. And we got fantasy implications from that. They decided and they announced today that Jimmy Garoppolo will not be the quarterback starting for the Raiders going forward,
Yeah.
and Aiden O'Connell is going to be given a chance to show in the last 9 games of the season
Yeah.
whether they need to go for a high level draft pick next year or not. Um,
Well,
I
he's the
am
best quarterback we have. But I'm pretty
yes
sold on that now.
for for whatever that means. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm excited.
Hmm.
I think what's bigger than all of my free agent and waiver wire and preseason taxi squad investment in Aiden O'Connell is
Yeah.
what the implications are right now for Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, Michael Mayer, and to a
True.
lesser extent, Hunter Renfro.
Right.
So I went and I looked back at some of the stats, and I was trying to find a silver lining, and Renfro was targeted just as much when O'Connell was in against the Chargers as he was last game. So
Yeah.
I part of Renfro's problem this last week was slipping on the field. So that was terrible. He could have had a showcase game, but
Mhm. Everyone could have.
I'm so excited for what's about to come.
And just going off of Renfro completely, or sorry, purely off of what you were talking about with Renfro, I think a big thing for him was that game last week where it's like clearly, I mean, you brought it up as the field being too slippery. I didn't see a lot. I saw one from Devontae from pretty easy third or fourth and 2 or something like that, and it was like Jimmy threw behind him. He
Mm-hmm.
was trying to lead him, and Devontae just kind of slipped up on it, and it was just a bad play overall, of the many bad plays there were last game. But I think for Renfro specifically, it was maybe a mistiming or a miscommunication or something like that. There were obviously some plays that he, was the reason it wasn't converted, but it was not like he's lost all of it. It was not like he's not the same person anymore. I still think he can be a great, third down guy. I think he can still be a touchdown scorer. I think obviously there's some production decrease that's going to happen from his 2021 when he's not the main and only target. And there's obviously going to be a fall off, but even before that season he was still a 600 yard, I think 3 or 4 touchdown guy. If that's your wide receiver 3, switching off of course with Tucker depending on the scheme and the plays they're trying to run, that's a pretty productive wide receiver to have on a fairly cheap contract. And so I wasn't necessarily excited about like trading him or the potential to trade him. It was more so just we're obviously going to be able to get something for him, and that would be, at least in regards to our future, that would be the best case scenario. But obviously, keeping him, I'm not going to complain.
Right, but knowing all of the players'
Hmm.
personalities that we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years, more than fantasy production, as human beings, I wanted to see them go to good places where they could thrive. I mean,
Yeah,
there are wide receiver performances through a year that you can kind of chalk up as fluky.
hmm,
But when somebody finishes as wide receiver 11 in fantasy, you
yeah,
kind of have to look at that and go, well, he can do that again.
yeah.
Why are you not going to him? And so hopefully there's more in store for Renfro.
And
We
and I
also
think so. Go ahead.
no you
No, you're the star of the show.
no I was going to move on from Renfro, but you were going to
Oh,
say something else.
I think obviously the reality is that he can. It's just I don't think he will. I don't think he's ever really going to be 1,000 yard receiver again for the Raiders because of Devonte Adams and Jacoby being there. I don't know what happened to Jacoby Myers this year, but he is just picking up right where he left off in New England. Clearly is like the number 2 guy now, has really solidified himself as a fucking dog. He can block, he can, do all the tough dirty plays. He's kind of like Harrison Barnes, where he's just the guy that does everything for you. He's not always going to be the best performer. He's not always going to be your number 1 guy, but when you ask him to do something game on the line other than winning a game in the playoffs, um, he's going to be there for you. Sorry
or
to bring up that memory.
or a lateral.
Yeah.
Um,
Or trying to push forward into the first down instead of pushing backwards. But again, he's not perfect. He's not your X receiver. He's not your one. He's just a steady set of hands and just a good route runner who's like a big slot option. Six
he's
two, tallest receiver that we've got.
he's not anything now that he hasn't been before. And there was a
Yeah.
point I want to say 3 years ago, where I was smashing him on like everywhere I could because he had the most receptions without a touchdown of any receiver. And
Yeah.
if you're into that kind of thing,
Hmm.
positive touchdown regression is real, and we're seeing that a little bit.
Yeah.
So
He's making the most out of his targets, is what I'm seeing.
I was gonna get into Josh Jacobs a little bit too, because one of the things that
Yeah.
we have seen in the first 8 games is a little bit of a lot of production downturn. Anybody who watched the weekend warm up and my absolute Meltdown, not Monday Meltdown trademark, but my meltdown in
Yeah.
the weekend warm up, talking about how Josh
Don't ruin my
McDaniels
favorite players.
ruined Josh Jacobs, or
Yeah.
was in the process, whatever. He was down 2 yards per carry. And one
Hmm.
of the reasons for that is stacked boxes, because Jimmy Garoppolo, and we saw on Monday night, cannot throw the ball deep. So a one safety shell is the defense to play against the Raiders when Jimmy
Hmm.
G's on the field, and then you stick 8 guys in the box and you're good.
Hmm.
You get and then get the single high safety to bracket Devonte Adams, and it was just a very easy offense to
Hmm.
stop. I saw a really great quote today about how Josh McDaniels was super hard. Josh McDaniels' offense was super complicated for the offensive players and super easy for the defense to stop. and
Yeah, it's one of those offenses where, and I know we're gonna really like deep dive into what McDaniel's leaving means for the team and for the culture, the fan base, everything. I know we're about to dive deep into that, but I think specifically for the offensive players, it was just complicated. Yeah, you can argue that there wasn't a lot of time to implement the system. I'm going to call bullshit on that. You had an off season, you had a whole season. Carr clearly knew. He just was like, "This is fucking dumb. I'm going to audible out of this." And I've matured enough with these last 8 games, really seeing what the problem was to understand that it was not Carr's fault. Maybe he just genuinely wasn't the answer for us, but he's better than what we've got now, and I'm fully willing to admit that. Um, but
I it's not that he wasn't genuinely the answer for us. He took us to the playoffs basically by himself without
uh,
a
I
head
know
coach.
I watched
And
there, and I feel like it was either Marcus or I forget. I haven't seen enough of the Tape Don't Lies this year to not call him BD, but his co-host now,
Matt.
uh, Matt, yeah, Matt Holder, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. See, I got it. I know you, Matt. I see you. I think it was Marcus though who said, um, what was it? Remind me what we were just talking about.
Carr being wasted for. We
That's
could
right.
add two
So
seasons of Carr at this point after
that
going to the playoffs with Devontae, who caught 1,500 yards from Carr last year.
okay. So he made a point of saying that Carr was extended, which was, either the smart or dumb option, depending on your perspective. But he was extended. He was then benched for the last 2 games. He was then he just then left. He wasn't even traded, but he was talking about it, and he said that if McDaniels had just straight up traded Carr after, he was a leader, he was, this and that, he led us to the playoffs almost by himself, all of this stuff. If that was the case and he traded him, you're getting nothing short of a first round pick and then some. And so for that to have been an option for us, and then there were all the reports that like Mayock was turning down, offers for multiple first round picks, stuff like that, in his tenure as the GM. With all that being said, if that's the case, and if that's the reality of the situation, and instead what winds up happening is he spends a lot of money only for him to then just be like, no, fuck you guys. I'm not going to let you trade me to a team that's going to lose assets for the team to build around me. I'm going to go to a team, they get Brian Brzee, they get all these other guys, and they're playing about as well as you could hope for a Dennis Allen led team. And I'm not a former Raider. That's my guy, but you know it's not the ideal situation. Let's go with that. And Carr is playing his best despite that. And I've really been
And he's going
impressed.
to get better. I
I want to
mean,
see consistency. That's it. I want to see 3-4 games of that same performance.
and he has done that plenty of times before.
Yeah,
And that's the thing that people kind of keep forgetting about Derek Carr, is that he has had a different head coach or a different offensive coordinator or both almost every year of his career. I
yeah.
think the longest continuity he's ever had is 2 seasons. Um,
Mm,
and they just, like, they keep changing. Like, first it was Dennis Allen, and then it was somebody else, and then they made his his best friend, the quarterback's coach, the offensive coordinator, and then after a year they fired him, and then they got somebody
Yeah.
else in, and then Gruden came on, and they just kept changing. So then he goes, like, Gruden goes, Bisaccia comes in, then he leaves, and McDaniels comes in. That doesn't last. Now he's with Dennis Allen. It's like he, for somebody like Matt Stafford, the first 9 years of his career was within the same system, or at least with the same team,
Yeah.
and they had a lot of turnover too, but he had
Mhm.
pretty consistent production. You look at Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes has had how many years with the same head coach,
Like 6 or 7 now, 8
same
maybe.
system, even though
Yeah.
there's a different offensive coordinator, they're still
Mhm.
basically running the same thing. Derek Carr has never had that.
Right.
And when he was left up to his own devices in 2021, he essentially carried the team with his brain,
Mhm.
a little bit less with his arm. Because realistically, what was Bisaccia doing? Bisaccia was sitting there on the headset going, "Okay, Derek,
Yeah.
whatever you want." So
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
you flip the calendar, and McDaniels is the opposite,
Mhm.
and he still had, it wasn't a terrible year. It was,
No.
I mean, especially with his connection with Devontae,
Mhm.
and for Josh McDaniels to look at that relationship and decide that what he's going to do is, like, sever it and move on from that.
It's incompetent.
That was the first thing that told me this is not the right situation. No,
And
it
again, I don't
wasn't.
know if
It wasn't the
I
defensive losses. It wasn't the late game losses or the
right.
coaching decisions or anything like that, because that stuff comes from a new coach sometimes. It
Mhm.
was when he brought in Devontae Adams
Yeah.
for a first rounder and a second rounder, and
Yep.
Devontae only did it because, number one, he was a Raider fan growing up, and number two, he had a relationship with Carr.
Mhm.
So he chose to come to Vegas,
Yeah.
and McDaniels severed that relationship. That was the breaking point for me. I was like,
Yeah.
this is
A-
not
and
going to
and
work.
again, I don't know if we're really getting into it right now, or if you wanted to talk about a few different things, just before the specifics of what we hate about McDaniels. But I was eventually going to ask, what was the first and what was the last point where you were like, nah, fuck this guy. Um,
The
I think
That was the first,
again,
was severing Carr.
okay,
And
I-
there hasn't been
yeah,
a last. It has just been a series of
right.
see since that moment.
Yeah, and there's again there's a lot to go off from here, but I think for me it was so first off, I think all of us came into it with rose tinted glasses. We saw the 6 Super Bowls. We saw he's already been a head coach. Obviously, Mike McDaniel himself was a coaching candidate. I don't even know if we brought him in for an interview. And the reason he goes to the Dolphins, and I've said this before, is that it was such a like up in the air thing in terms of the direction of the team. But they were a good team. They were. I think Brian Flores had them at like 9-8 and then like 10-7 or something like that in back-to-back years. Like he was doing good. He just really did not get along with Tua, and he clearly did not see the same direction for the team. But he was leading good defenses. He was coaching the team the right way. And Mike McDaniel goes in and is like, I'm going to revolutionize the NFL. Not just this team, but like we're going to drop 70 on the Broncos. We're going to do all this and that. And we didn't even give him an interview, and neither did the Broncos, which is why
But
they put up 70.
I
Um,
don't think, even if McDaniel had had a chance to come in, I don't
yeah,
think the team, the way it was structured
mhm,
between 2021 and 2022, I don't think it fit what he wanted to come in and implement.
no,
I don't think Carr was the quarterback that Tua is.
no,
I
he's
don't
not a
think
point guard.
Jacobs is the running back situation like
Yeah,
Mostert, uh,
or A Chain.
and what he inherited. It's
Yeah,
just a different system.
yeah,
And as much as I would like to think that Mike McDaniel would have come in and
mhm,
revolutionized everything with us, um, when I look back on it and I look at the personnel that we had,
mhm,
like, it was a John Gruden system,
yeah.
and I don't think
It was a
McDaniel
pound the
could
rock
have done
West
much.
Coast classic. Like I get what you're saying, and I think that his system highly revolves around motion and just like the 4.2, 4.3 speed guys. There's obviously a lot of intricacies and scheming and everything. I can't begin to explain what Mike McDaniel does
No,
on a
but
week
could
to
you
week
imagine?
basis.
Could you imagine Waller, Myers, Adams, and Renfro all in motions?
I mean, sure. I would also love to think that Mayer is still on the team at that point. I still think spending a second rounder on a tight end, even with Waller on the team, would have been a good idea. Just because 30
Oh
year
yeah,
old injury
yeah.
history. Like I would have loved to have seen Mayer in motion. I think he's like really developing.
I would
Um,
feel a lot better about Michael Mayer if Darren Waller was still here.
oh yeah, no, and I'm very aware of that. And yeah, again, the Darren Waller situation. He's of course a Raiders legend for us. He's a Raiders hero. Same thing with Renfro. The past couple of years have been very rough for us, and I think even just off of why Mark Davis hired McDaniels in the first place with Ziegler, as like this little buddy duo from the Patriots, is because he saw the dysfunction of the team for the last few seasons. Let's be honest, last 20 years. And he said, all right, enough is enough. We're going to try a new direction. We're going to go with quote unquote stability. We're going to go with guys that have clearly run a system that is, predicated off of you listen to us, our way or the highway, and we can make you go from a sixth round pick to a fucking Super Bowl champion, Super Bowl MVP with like they did with Julian Edelman. We will come in, we will promise these things, and they didn't deliver. And I think that it was really just an old school style of football, especially with the scheme. It was very, as much as it seemed on paper like a new school, we were hyping it up in the 2022 preseason as like, these guys are coming in with a fresh mindset. They're going to give Carr something he hasn't had for a long time. He's going to know how to use Waller more effectively, all this and that. Like, he's going to
Yeah,
do we were projecting him to do what McDaniel has done.
Waller for Gronk,
Yeah,
Adams for Moss, and Hunter
Renfro
Renfro for
for
Welker,
yeah,
Amendola,
yeah,
Edelman. So I have a small theory,
mm,
and that theory is that Mark Davis watches TDL, watches Tape Don't Lie,
mm,
and the reason that I was kind of excited for McDaniel's to come in was
mm,
because I watched Tape Don't Lie, and
me too.
Marcus had some breakdowns of what New England was doing on offense when Josh McDaniels was the
Yes,
offensive coordinator.
yes,
And it was very similar to what the Raiders were running with option routes and things like that.
mm,
What I didn't expect was for him to come in and absolutely change everything. And here's a perfect example.
yes,
You look at the success that the Miami Dolphins are having right now, and you look at the tragedy that is the Las
mm,
Vegas Raiders,
mm,
and systems can be employed and they can be player dependent or not, whatever. Did you see Billy Wayne Davis's Raiders beanie? That
yeah.
was
No, I was like, I feel like I own that.
all right, all right. But
I think
two
I have that same
things.
one.
When you watch the Dolphins press conferences with Mike McDaniel,
Mm,
you want to like be around that guy and follow him.
yeah,
When you watch Josh McDaniel's press conferences, you want to punch him in his lips.
you know,
If I'm a player, I'm following Mike McDaniel. When Mike
yeah,
McDaniel tells me, um, I've watched every single throw that Tua Tagovailoa has made on tape from high school, college, and in the NFL,
yeah,
and I feel like I can make him a better quarterback.
mm,
I'm going to believe that. When Josh McDaniels says, I come from the Bill Belichick tree and I won 6 Super Bowls and I had Tom Brady and I'm going
mm,
to make you do what I know works, that's a whole nother thing. This little
oh yeah,
facial expression, like I'm not following that guy. And
yeah,
it was obvious last year that he didn't have control of the locker room, which is where the rift came with him and Carr,
mm,
because he felt Carr was undermining him because Carr had built the locker room. Carr was the
yeah,
leader of the team, and
yeah.
it did not fit what McDaniels wanted to do.
Mm. And again, you can question Carr the player, you can question Carr the quarterback. There are few, but there are things that he is like still to this day extremely questionable on things like footwork and everything. That there's breakdowns of it. There's tons of stuff like that actual quarterbacks have done analysis on and stuff. I'm not an expert or smart enough to like really go down that path right now, but as much as you can point out those things in every quarterback, the one thing that Derek Carr has always had, and he will have this over pretty much every other quarterback until we get someone that brings us to the Super Bowl, is leadership and player connections. I think he's going to make an awesome coach in the future. I think he's going to make an awesome, like, whatever part of the staff he comes back to the Raiders for, because I feel like he's going to do that. He's going to be like, all right, I've hung up the cleats, but I'm coming back to like help them still win in every way that I can. He's already said he's coming back to the Raiders at some point in his career. Like, he is always a guy that people are willing to follow and willing to stand behind and back when it comes to these things.
Yeah.
And so for McDaniels to think that he's the guy, he's coming in, we're going to see success because of that. It's really the same reason that guys like, what's his name? Bill O'Brien for the Texans didn't work. The former Lions coach, Matt Patricia,
Mm-hmm.
he came in with the fucking pencil on his ear, the clipboard, the mentality that like I'm the main character in this story. It's more about me than it is you. You run my system. And you remember and you watch some of those old interviews, like Darius Slay was pushed out of the team because he had a differing opinion. He had like players talking about him after he was fired, like this is one of the worst coaches I've ever like been with. He was developing a system where it's clear that you have an ego. It's clear that you think you're the fucking star of the show, but this is a player-based game. It's not a coach-based game. This is about the players. I think even our new interim coach said this in his press conference today. He was like, they go through hell and back every single week to play on every Sunday. Like, they are the ones putting their bodies on the line. They're the ones doing everything. You sit there with a fucking clipboard, and I'm not trying to undermine head coaches, but I'm just saying, like,
Right.
you think you're the fucking guy? No.
No, you're
And to
not
have
Max
that ego
Crosby.
and that mentality is just, it's why people from the Belichick system don't succeed. It's because Bill knows what he's fucking doing. He's been doing it for 60 years. He has won, like, 8 Super Bowls at this point because of it. And really, honestly, I feel like McDaniels, his career was made by being Belichick's little guy and Tom Brady's fucking play calling understudy.
Right. But what should happen in that situation is somebody should take all of the lessons that they learned from that
Mm-hmm.
culture, from that team building perspective, from that system of
Mm-hmm.
running an offense and play calling and everything, be able to take all of that experience and transfer that. I don't think Mike McDaniel has done that. I don't think
Probably not.
D'Amico Ryans has done that. I think they have taken what Kyle Shanahan established in San Francisco and they'd put their own twist on it.
Mm-hmm.
Same with Robert Saleh in New York. So,
Awesome head coach, by the way. He might be a former player, he might not be, but he seems like one of these guys, like a Vrabel, a Dan Campbell, just like I don't know what it is about like the fucking jacked head coaches that seems to make everybody be like, "Nah, I'm gonna listen to this guy." But like, even just today, watching again our new interim head coach, even just watching him speak, I was like, I'm ready to run through a fucking brick wall for this guy. Like, I'm gonna run through a field of glass just to like make this dude happy. Like, player run teams do well. Dan Campbell's proving that right now in Detroit. And by the way, I've loved the Lions for years now. They're my NFC team. Thank you for getting this motherfucker fired. I love you, Lions. I will always love you. One pride. Like, come on, let's go. And again, Dan Campbell is one of these guys that, like, you see him in the pregame show, he's fucking crying. He's like, I love that these guys are willing to lay it all on the line out there every Sunday for me. Like, they're willing to go to war for him, and
oh yeah,
nobody's willing to go to war from Josh McDaniels, this little 5'7" Kevin James looking motherfucker. No
no,
one's
but
willing to go to war.
if he had like cried and said, "I love these guys," they might have. Um,
Maybe if he
Rob,
was a human being. instead of a statistical fucking douche.
Saleh wasn't a player, just a coach. And fun fact, his brother was in one of the 9/11 towers and escaped to safety. So, all right.
Nice.
Okay, so we have some fantasy implications for the change. Aiden
Yes.
O'Connell is starting on Sunday at
And for the rest of the
playerprofiler.com.
year.
At playerprofiler.com, I wrote
Mm.
my happiest submission to date.
Mm-hmm.
Two of them, one about Jimmy G being benched and the other about Aiden O'Connell being the starter.
Yep.
I got to put in how disgruntled Raider Nation is. I got to put in how the handsomest man in the NFL has been benched and is now the most expensive backup quarterback in the NFL.
He's getting
It
cut.
it felt so nice to write those blurbs. So go to playerprofiler.com, search for Aiden O'Connell, go to
Please do.
news, and that blurb right there that talks about him starting, that's me. I wrote that. Okay, so we have all these fantasy implications,
Mm-hmm.
but what's next for the Raiders? So I know that everybody wants one single person, Ben Johnson. And
Got a couple other candidates that I wanted to talk about.
I also know that Jim Harbaugh is again going to be brought up as a potential candidate, even though he said he doesn't ever want to go to the NFL. Now he had something the last time they were in a coaching search. Now he's got a new thing with this new like spying and whatever controversy. I don't want Jim Harbaugh. I don't want Jim Harbaugh.
No.
I didn't want Jim Harbaugh before. I don't ever want
No.
Jim Harbaugh. I don't want Jim Harbaugh.
No.
But this is my non Ben Johnson shortlist.
Yes.
Frank Smith. He's the
That
offensive
was my guy I
coordinator
was going to bring up.
of the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah.
I did look into Daryl Bevel, who's the offensive. He's the quarterbacks coach and offensive planner. So he's a co-offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
That guy was in Detroit. So I was like, ooh, looking through the. I was trying to poach the Miami coaching staff basically, and I see his name and I'm like, well, he'd be easier to get than Frank Smith.
Right.
And then I looked into his history. So in 2020, he was the offensive coordinator for Matt Patricia's Lions.
Mm.
Matt Patricia got fired,
Yeah.
and Daryl Bevel took over as the interim head coach, and then wasn't hired when they hired Dan Campbell.
Mm-hmm.
He gets hired at Jacksonville to be Urban Meyer's offensive coordinator for 2021.
Mm.
Urban Meyer gets fired in the middle of the season. Daryl Bevel continues as the interim head coach and then is not retained when they brought in
Right.
Doug Peterson. And I thought about it for a second and I was like, do I really want a guy who was the offensive coordinator for two coaches who wound up getting fired,
Right.
is now not the offensive coordinator in Miami? It's almost like Mike McDaniel is like, hey, I like you and some of your brain, but let's go ahead and keep it back there for a second. I'll have
Right.
you doing this because we know how good he is at putting people in their best spot for potential.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe he recognizes something in Bevel. He's got a great mind, but he should not be in control of the offensive coordination.
Right.
But Frank Smith is. So Frank Smith
And
is
I
number
think an
one.
interesting angle about that actually is when he takes over as an interim and he is not retained, they get a pretty fucking good coach to come in. So
Right.
maybe he's like a Tyrod Taylor where he comes in for the Ravens and eventually Lamar Jackson takes over. He comes in for the Browns and eventually Baker, the Bills, Josh Allen, like wherever Tyrod goes, I'm worried it's going to happen with this fucking Tommy DeVito kid when we face the Giants next. It's like
No,
wherever Tyrod goes, the next guy up is like a star of the NFL.
DeVito had negative passing yards last week, so I'm
Yeah,
not worried
they
about it.
finished the game with -9 yards
Yeah.
passing.
All right. My second choice is Lou Anarumo. He's from the Cincinnati Bengals.
Isn't that your third?
No, he's my second. Frank Smith is the
Oh,
first.
oh,
Well,
because
okay.
you
My
meant the obvious Ben Johnson, so you're not even going to talk about him.
right. I'm
Okay,
because everybody's going to bring up Ben Johnson. I wanted to
yeah.
do my top three of non Ben Johnson. So Lou Anarumo from the Bengals,
Hmm.
defensive coordinator. I don't want a defensive coordinator head
No.
coach. I want an offensive guy.
Yeah.
Unless the guy from Arizona is willing to part ways. And
It's kind of why I don't want Brian Flores, as much as it would be cool to have like and look, I'm assuming that Champ Kelly is our GM going forward. I don't think he's just the interim. I think if he does well enough with the rest of the year, he will then be promoted to like full-time GM, and I have no problems with that. I like Champ Kelly a lot. He was the assistant, to Ziegler. He did a lot of the scouting. He knows the players. He's done a lot of like player profiles and everything.
he's
He's
been
a
a
smart
GM
guy.
candidate. He's been a GM candidate in other situations too.
Yeah, so I think he could be elevated, and I think it'd be cool to have obviously like a black GM and head coach. But I personally do not want Brian Flores. I don't.
No,
I think
but
he'd be an awesome defensive coordinator.
if
Look at what he's
Antonio
doing for the
Pierce,
Vikings.
if
But
Antonio Pierce runs off 9 wins in a row,
yes,
if
I don't think so. But
if Antonio Pierce leads this team to the playoffs with Aiden O'Connell, they will have no choice but to retain him. Um, yeah,
right,
and so so Lou
fuck it. Let's go for
Anarumo,
Super Bowl. We're hyped right now.
I don't
Aiden
want.
O'Connell wins a Super Bowl as a rookie. Fuck it.
I have the vapors. Um, so Lou Anarumo from the Bengals is number 2.
Okay,
And again, I don't want a
I like it.
defensive head coach. Um, so this is a combo package because one of the reasons is because I want Patrick Graham to stay.
hmm
Okay,
I like Patrick Graham. Look at
my
everything he's done.
my number 3 is a slash Nathaniel Hackett slash Ajiro Evero. One of those two guys. Both UC Davis legends. Ajiro Evero
Okay,
is the defensive coordinator for the Carolina Panthers. Nathaniel Hackett, of course, is the offensive coordinator for the Jets. I want Nathaniel Hackett to come over, be the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, and continue to smash the shit out of the Denver Broncos and Sean Payton over and over and over and over and over just to prove a point. Denver cannot beat Las Vegas.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say I would rather have a head coach who can't beat the Broncos but can beat all 15 other teams that we face. Because I don't even care at this point about the Broncos. Like they're not even on my radar as like a rival. They haven't been a rival to us in a long time. I know you guys just won your Super Bowl by beating the fucking Chiefs for the first time in 16 tries. Good fucking job.
Now their longest losing streak to one team is to the Las Vegas Raiders.
Is us. Yeah, we take over. We continue to own them.
And I want
But
UC Davis legend Nathaniel Hackett to continue that trend. If not him, Ajiro
sure.
Evero, also UC Davis legend. Um,
I don't
so
think
yeah,
those are smart, but I think those are fun.
they're heart calls. They're not. I mean,
I
but
know they're not. I know they're not real.
Ajiro
If
Evero had the number 14th ranked defense with Denver last season. Um,
and
that's
Hackett
better
was
than where we're
horrible
at.
as a head coach.
He wasn't. He was. He had a terrible Russell Wilson as his quarterback, and
Okay,
he also presumably uh, joined the Broncos thinking that they were going to go after Aaron Rodgers,
Rodgers. Yeah.
and they did not do that,
hmm
which is
Who makes
why
his job easy?
he waited
Makes
for
everybody's
Rodgers
job
to
easy.
sign with the Jets, and then he went to there. Um,
Yeah.
who's on your list? Non
Um.
Ben Johnson.
Okay. So on my list, honestly, for the longest time, it was Ben Johnson and only Ben Johnson because I think obviously that is the smartest choice. If we're going towards the route of like what the Dolphins did with McDaniel, if that is truly the direction of the NFL and you need a young, like future minded or I guess like forward thinking head coach at this point with a good scheme that uses motion, that uses all of its playmakers and puts them in the best position. If that's what you need to do going forward, then get Ben Johnson. But when I was on Twitter last night, I saw so much of Frank Smith. Didn't know who he was. I haven't really heard much about him. I don't know if he's currently with. Is he currently with the team right
Mm-hmm.
now? Okay, so
As far as
he
I
is one
know,
of us.
he's the offensive coordinator.
Okay, Well, no, they brought in somebody else for that.
The Dolphins?
Oh, hang on. Is Frank Smith the coordinator for the Dolphins?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Because I
No.
thought that he was part of our coaching tree, who was like, okay. So I had it all wrong then. But I know the roots that have been implanted within him for who he's like learned under. I know all the coaching trees. It's, parts Gruden, parts Shanahan, all this stuff. Like some of the more forward-thinking coordinators and people. He is currently the 1A, 1B for me with Johnson. I think he's very, again, forward thinking. He's helped Tua become a point guard of that offense. He's helped the offense really explode onto the scene and put up historic numbers. He is kind of the obvious choice. He seems to like really get good connections with players, seems to be like pretty understanding of what we're trying to do, which is
Well,
exactly what the Dolphins were trying to do a few years ago.
he
And
he he was the Raiders tight ends coach um, for Waller's breakout,
okay,
and
so he
and
knows
has a
a lot of the
relationship.
current players then.
Yeah, and he has a relationship with Mark Davis. So
Exactly.
those
He's
are two good
and so
things.
that must have been what I read, and also a graphic of him with the Raiders gear on. So I guess he was part of our coaching tree. So he's already familiar with everybody. He knows what we do. He knows our identity. He knows what it's like to be on the Raiders. Again, not sure if he is a former player. That just seems to be what you need now. Um,
No,
but
it's
he
not. Mike
seems
McDaniel wasn't a former player. Robert Saleh wasn't a former player.
he was the water boy for the Broncos. So that's basically on the team. Have you ever seen the movie Waterboy?
Yes,
Okay, I'm
you
obviously
can
joking,
do
but
it.
you can do it. Yeah, obviously Frank Smith seems like the easy choice. It would just be an easy come over here. You're clearly cool. You know everybody here. Let's just get things going. My second choice is, and it might be recency bias, but Antonio Pierce. I'm seriously ready to jump through some brick walls for him. Like that looks like a guy who you can go, that's my coach. Like he won a Super Bowl ring, not even in the same way that McDaniels did, where he was like just kind of there going, hey Tom, no touchdown, you got all right, thank you. It was like he's part of the team. It was an unlikely win. It was like just a true heart and soul into the team win for him. And so I think that his ring is a lot more, let's call it valid, than any of the six that McDaniels won.
Interesting.
So it's like a player earned, not just I was there holding a clipboard. Um, so again, he seems like the kind of guy that you can rally behind, the kind of guy that you can trust, that knows exactly. And again, he even talked about it in his conference. He was like, I know what these players have gone through. I've been there before. I get it. Like this shit is hard. And he was just like loud and open and honest. I'm from Compton. I was repping NWA with their Raiders hats on. I'm from LA. I live and die with the Raiders. Like that's a guy you can have as a leader. You cannot have a little fucking again 5'7" know it all Napoleon complex dude who thinks he's smarter than everybody else. And again, so I think my top two are Smith and you know and Pierce. After that, it's a wild west of options.
I'm your number three, mainly because I meet your height requirement
You're like my number 27 though.
because I'm over 5'7".
Are you? You
Shut
haven't
up.
gotten so old that you've shrunk
Shut up.
because
All
you
right.
you were 6'2"
Yeah,
and are now
I
six
was.
foot.
Interesting about that. And I had have a customer who played on the offensive line in high school with John Madden.
Oh,
And one,
who was
one
6'4"?
one day I was talking to this man, and he's one of the coolest guys I've ever known. So old, and 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 he looks at me and he goes, "I used to be 6'2". Now I'm 5'7". And I was like, "Oh no!"
Well, that's like grandpa old.
I started at
So
he's in his 80s.
yeah.
I started at 6. Well, I peaked at 6'2", and I've
Mhm.
I've been,
Well, let's be honest. You peaked in high school, but you peaked at 6'2".
excuse me, not even close. All right.
I haven't
So
even begun to peak.
we have our coaches list.
Mhm.
One thing I was going to say, if I'm Mark Davis, any this is how my head coaching interview is going to go, or GM, both. I'm going to have the person come in. Hi,
Mhm.
nice to meet you. Tell me a little bit about yourself. What changes are you going to make to change the culture here with the Las Vegas Raiders? How are you going to bring me a Lombardi trophy? And then once all that is out of the way, I'm going to slide them a piece of paper and it's going to say, write your number one draft pick.
Oh
And then
yeah.
have a little space. And anybody who answers offensive lineman, I'm hiring.
No. I and so here's why. As much as I think that that would be obviously the smart choice, that's the highest standard that you can have. Like I think we will finish in the inside of the top 10. It's it's a bit iffy of top 5 to top 3 because there are some bad teams. There are also some clearly tanking teams. Washington is one of them at this point. Holy shit, they're clearly just not going for it, and they're looking to move on. Um, and so again, I think if you have the option of trading up, or if you're at that spot in the top 3 to take a Drake May, you go for him because he can be your quarterback for 15 plus years as a 21-year-old going into the season. He has more talent than everybody but Caleb, and he is clearly the best quarterback in structure. He is just not as improvisational as Caleb Williams, which is really both a plus and a minus for Caleb, as we've seen in recent weeks. Almost lost to Cal, that kind of thing. So again, I would go for anybody that's willing to draft a quarterback in the first, because we've also seen and we've also talked about players and teams like Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith on the chart on the Chiefs being like fifth, sixth round picks and being arguably the best at their position. I think right now Creed Humphrey is like the best center in football. Um,
The bottom
you
line
can
is that
find these low tier guys.
you can find people who break out at every position in every round of the draft. You can do
Other
that.
than I think quarterback, I
You,
think you need a first round quarterback in order to really compete.
I disagree.
I,
And
I mean,
the
look, there is Jalen
and
Hurts, who's a second rounder. There's Lamar, who is absolute bottom of the first round. I'm not saying it needs to be a high first rounder, but when you really start to look at things like Super Bowl, appearances and wins, you look at playoff appearances and average value of a player beyond the first round at quarterback. As soon as you go into the second round, it dips like 30%.
you can also look at the number of high draft picks that were at quarterback that haven't worked out for their team, haven't made their
Of
team
course,
better in the
of
first five
course.
years. And the ones who were successful after 5 years are getting that fifth year contract, are being forced to sign an extension and making the
Hmm.
team rearrange the draft cap, the
Yes.
salary cap. You look at a situation like San Francisco, who is built on their offensive and defensive lines
Hmm.
and finding success. You don't necessarily need to find a quarterback in the top 5 picks. And one of the reasons I would ask somebody who's potentially wanting the job what who they would take first, and if they answered offensive lineman, I would hire them, is not necessarily because that's the player that they actually take, but that is their philosophy of team building.
Right.
Everything starts with the hogs in the middle. You got
To
your
surf the
offensive
trenches.
line and your defensive line. And if
Hmm.
you can have a first round pick, and if the offensive line cannot protect that player, then that player is not going to find success.
Right. And I think,
That's the reason.
okay. And going off of that, I think as much as it would be nice to think that we could have a Brock Purdy type player in O'Connell, as much as it would be nice to, build up our offensive line, except for Colton Miller, Parham, and Andre James. Because if we're being completely honest right now, Andre James has really solidified himself as like a top 10 to 15 center. Like, absolutely is a top half center. I know he's got his downfalls. He has his good and bad games, but when you look at production over the year so far, he has really like stepped up in a big way, as like this is kind of his breakout year. And him and Parham are a pretty good duo right now. And we obviously know how good Colton is. So I think the right side being rotated between Munford, Illuminor, and
Van
not
Roten.
Bars, Van Roten, who's also doing pretty fucking good. As much as he's been pretty good. I know he just got, again, we have good and bad games. There seems to be inconsistency, but on our best day, we have a good offensive line or a good enough offensive line that clearly has three pieces. So I think if you go I think if you go first round quarterback, that's, obviously going to give you one of the best quarterbacks in the draft, so to speak. And yes, the draft is not an exact science. Nothing really is in the NFL. It's just this will give you statistically the best chance. But if you then go second round defensive tackle, third round offensive tackle, I don't care about corners, I don't care about receivers, another fucking tight end for whatever reason they would draft, a safety, I don't care about anything. If you go quarterback, tackle, defensive and then offensive tackle, or flip that if you want, you will have success going into next year. I really think that they need to just invest in the trenches, but I think for whoever's coming in as the new head coach is going to be like, I want to draft the guy who's the face of the franchise and can save me in case I'm not doing particularly well. So
Well, you
I
plan
think
for
that's the direction they'll go.
plan
Is
for off
quarterback and then trenches.
plan for offensive line. Take the best player available. All
Sure.
right. So that's going to do it for this episode of the Fantasy Burn. I want to thank my guest, Billy Wayne Davis. Again, go
I
see
do too.
him, Eureka, California, November 3rd and 4th, San Francisco, November 8th, Vancouver, British Columbia. What up, Grindberg? November 9th, Seattle, 11th, November 10th, Eugene, Oregon, 11th of
Yeah, of
November, and Portland, Oregon, the 12th of November. And thank you, Know the Game, for hopping in one more time. We'll
course.
do it again.
We love
And
Grindberg, by the way. And in this household, we love Grindberg. Shout out to Canada.
oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I got a surprise for him on the weekend warm up on Thursday. Uh,
Yeah?
that's when we tape. It gets put up on Saturday. All right,
Oh,
so from me here in the Fantasy Burn studios and Know the Game and Billy Wayne Davis, I hope you guys win.